Uh, my friends, my beautiful, beautiful children who have joined me here on this wonderful day, overcast as it may be in Northern California, it is still shining sun in my heart because we have here a wonderful guest with us, Hunter Avallone, the man, the myth, the legend, so beautifully framed by YouTube chat as the gayest straight man versus the straightest gay man. Hunter, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for having me on, and I'm looking forward to having a good debate slash discussion.
I am extremely excited. So before we kick off, can I share a bit of an anecdote?
Go for it.
So I engage in a lot of hyperbole on my channel, in part because I'm a generally hyperbolic person, and in part because we live in very, divisive times. And I never really know if a conservative is a crypto Nazi or not. I never really know. I can make guesses. Steven Crowder talking about how Nazism is a left-leaning ideology and how the Crusades were actually justified. I can make some deductions. And I didn't really know with you. I didn't see anything. Well, Nazi, but I didn't see anything contrary. But then just recently, a couple of days ago, I saw you actually going fucking ape on some alt-righters and Christian fundamentalists in your Twitter feed. And that actually cemented for me the idea that I can have a discussion with you. And that's fantastic.
Yeah, what it really comes down to is I'm against authoritarianism at the end of the day. And I'm sure we'll get into this in a little while, but that's part of the reason I oppose a lot of what I would call the leftist agenda. But I also dislike the authoritarianism when it comes to the alt-right as well as religious fundamentalists. I don't know if you know this, but I was actually raised very religious. I was raised in an environment where it's just very strict religious beliefs. And that kind of grew into just a strong disliking for authoritarianism. And I was getting attacked by people that were farther right than I am. I'm still a little cautious with who I label alt-right and who I just label far right, because there is an important distinction there.
It's the Jews.
However, the people I was arguing with on Twitter were angry at me because I was coming from the position that being pro-gay marriage is actually kind of conservative. And you can imagine the response I got for saying that.
I saw quite a bit of response in the lefty sphere too. A lot of people had contention with that point. But frankly, I would rather people I disagree with be saying that than say the opposite. To be a conservative is to oppose gay marriage. I would You know what? As happy middle grounds go, this one really isn't that bad.
Right.
And I think that's the main reason why I wanted to talk to you. I mean, obviously, I have a financial incentive to talk with you, YouTube, you know how, obviously, but
of course,
on a personal level, and I do care very much about this. I think that your content, particularly concerning LGBT issues, is really, really bigoted. And I think that it might stem, from a couple of misconceptions you have. And I think you're not actually a bigot. I think you're actually legitimately interested in the well-being and egalitarianism.
What are some of these misconceptions?
Give
me one off the top of your head.
Yeah, I think that you're under the impression, more or less, that LGBT people have achieved social parity in this country. And because of that, attempts on their part to right an imagined imbalance are instead evidence of them going too far to achieve supremacy, to force you to kowtow to their values, that sort of thing, rather than what it is, which is fighting an existing oppressive superstructure.
Right. So this is where we have a bit of a disagreement here. Now, I would never disagree with you if you were to say that LGBT people still face discrimination in this country. They absolutely do. It's terrible. I mean, we can look at the murder rates. It's horrible. And I've been making an effort to raise more awareness of this from my channel. I recently did a video on Pride Month, actually, and although the title looked like a typical LGBT video,
I saw it. Don't worry.
Yeah. So what this really comes down to is I do believe LGBT people face discrimination in this country. There's no doubt about that. However, I think from a legal standpoint, they are not oppressed. And I say that because if I were to go out and punch a transgender person in the face. That's discrimination. However, because the transgender person is not oppressed on a legal standpoint, they could pursue legal action, and I would be rightfully charged with a hate crime.
Yeah, and I agree to an extent. Now, there are still some problems with, say, trans equality. We've got the bathroom bill shenanigans, Trump trying to legislate their existence out of like federal protections concerning employment discrimination. Obviously, the military ban being a pretty contentious one. But broadly speaking,
see, I don't think the military ban is. I think that I actually think the military ban is pretty reasonable. If I'm being completely honest.
Why do you think they did it?
Well, I think that transgender people at the end of the day, and the thing is I want to make it very clear that I'm not coming from a position of hatred or contempt for transgender people when I say this, but I do think that transgender people are not fit or are not suitable to fight in the military. And there's a couple reasons why that is. First of all, the military of all things, I mean, the military's always been, and this is going to sound bad, I guess, but discriminatory to a degree on who they allow to fight in the military. So I don't think that trans people are fit to serve in the military because they have a lot of mental health issues. For one, I mean, their suicide rate is exponentially higher than most. They have high rates of anxiety. They have depression, and these are all associated with gender dysphoria. And I think that gender dysphoria is a very real, difficult thing to deal with. And I just don't think that that's the right mental mindset for people that are fighting in our military. I don't think it would be healthy for transgender people who already have a higher suicide rate and higher rates of anxiety as well. Plus, on top of that, sex changes range anywhere from $100,000 to $130,000. And I don't think that the military should be paying for that.
Well, while I agree with you that there is a correlation between transness and mental illness, I don't think that's intrinsic. Things like depression, anxiety are probably correlated with a lot of social stigma that trans people experience, and gender dysphoria is experienced by some, by not all trans people. While I do agree that there is a correlation,
I think I would disagree with you there as well. I'm sorry to cut you off, but you have to have gender dysphoria in order to be an authentic transgender person. Do you disagree with that?
I do. Yeah, trans just means you identify as a gender other than that which you were assigned at birth. It's separate, well, while related, of course. It's separate to the state of having an intense psychological sense of discomfort with your physiology.
Okay. Understand. That makes sense.
But in regards to the trans military ban, the problem is, and while I agree with you in this like intuitive sense that trans people in the military, they bring problems with them, and I don't mean that in a disparaging way. I get that. But the Pentagon had already conducted research in the viability of transgender military personnel decades ago, and they had already developed systems in accordance with the possibility of trans people joining, and were okay with doing so. Trump's decision to invoke a ban on trans people didn't seem to be motivated by any new research which had come out. If anything, newer research in the medical field concerning like trans people and their relationship to gender dysphoria indicates that they're more socially functional than we thought they were before. It seems like Trump's decision to invoke that ban via executive action, and whether or not it goes through, you will see how the courts go, but his decision to do so was motivated essentially by bigotry. Unless he had information to counteract the Pentagon's assessment, then
there's a couple things there. It's not. First of all, it's not purely whether trans people are fit to serve in the military or not. It's also that the budget for the military, I do not believe that should be spent on sex change operations. And I think that was part of the reason for Trump's transgender ban. On top of that, I really don't think it's fair for you to say that Donald Trump is motivated by bigotry. I don't know if you know this, but the Trump administration just launched an initiative to decriminalize
homosexuality overseas.
Right,
I know.
Right.
And I'll be perfectly honest, I don't really care. He's been eroding LGBT rights in this country to performatively state you're going to fix things overseas while simultaneously preventing, foreign embassies from flying those flags.
How else has he eroded transgender rights?
Well, he's been largely supportive of the trans bathroom bill shenanigans, which are, again, based on fear-mongering, not actual data. There are actual studies on this subject showing that transgender people present essentially no threat to people in restrooms. It's less than the general population. So that's just fear-mongering. He removed the Obama-era Title VII protections that transgender people enjoyed for preventing workplace discrimination. The trans military ban, I mean, There are quite a few instances, not to mention his vice president is Mike Pence. That's, I think, a pretty big middle finger to the LGBT community. And he cohabitates with a bunch of other right-leaning figures who have themselves made, we can put it nicely, controversial statements on the LGBTQ community. My goal
there's
here...
a couple
I'm not interested in whether Trump is a bigot. In my frame of view, most people are bigots. I'm probably a bigot. What I'm interested in is a discussion fundamentally about how LGBT people in this country are still disadvantaged on a pretty broad scale, and what's more, how your content encourages that discrimination, worsens it, and probably provokes people to levels of bigotry you are not comfortable with.
Well, we'll get to my content in a moment because that's a pretty big accusation that you're making. First, I want to address what you said about Donald Trump being transphobic. When you explain it that way, of course, it sounds bad. And I think that the way you're explaining it isn't the most honest, because this isn't rolling back protections for transgender people. I know the bathroom thing was a big one for schools, allowing transgender people to use the bathroom of their choice. Trump rolled back the federal protections for that. All that did, it was leave it up to the states. Yeah. And a lot of these other rulings that people claim are going to hurt transgender people stem from a religious freedom side of things as well, which I know that's kind of a messy issue. And believe me, I used to be religious. I'm not religious anymore.
But that's how you get away with bigotry. You don't just say, oh, trans people are canceled. You say, well, if we leave it up to the states, that means statistically some states aren't going to allow those protections. If we leave it up to religious freedom, statistically some people are going to exercise that religious right.
Well, shouldn't people have religious freedom?
Well, we've decided in the United States of America that there are protected classes. There are certain groups or categories of people that people should not be able to discriminate against if they're an employer or a landowner, like a rentier. And this seems to fly in the face of that. It was generally accepted by the Supreme Court that transgender people were protected under those those protected groups clauses, under like the Obama era legislation that put them forward, at least in regards to employment. His decision to roll that back is an indication that he would rather keep them out of the protected class status, to throw them to the whim of fate and to the bigotry of a generally hostile population.
I understand that there's still progress to be made when it comes to the employment of LGBT people. However, right now, I mean, I'm sure you know this, that the Supreme Court is taking some cases up on whether you can fire someone for being gay or not. And the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission does interpret and enforce Title VII's prohibition of sex discrimination as forbidding any employment discrimination based on gender identity or sexual orientation. And there have actually been a couple lawsuits I was reading up on, and this title was used to help these people who were wrongfully terminated win the lawsuits.
No, I agree. We've made progress. I would never deny that, but it's being rolled back. Things were better in 2015
the thing is
than
I
they
think
are now.
your view, I think it's from your point of view. However, I mean, this to me sounds like fear mongering. You want to talk about fear mongering? This religious freedom rule, the headline from NBC says religious freedom rule could cause significant damage to LGBTQ healthcare, right? Mm-hmm. That's another one we hear, is that they're rolling back protections for healthcare. But let me find the guy's name really quickly. Roger Severno, the director of HHS Office for Civil Rights, actually defended the rule, and he said, and I quote, "This does not create new substantive rights. Rather, it gives life and enforcement tools to existing federal conscious protections that have been on the book for decades." And I mean, this is where the fear-mongering thing comes in. We have not seen the hypotheticals that some have used to criticize the rule actually develop in real life.
No, I agree. There are some elements of these protection rollbacks which have not had the intended consequences. We don't know if they're going to down the line, or if further rollbacks down the line are going to exacerbate these problems. I would ask you this then.
How does this logic not contradict your logic about transgender bathrooms? We could say, oh, well, there's a hypothetically, it could harm transgender people.
No.
There's men in the bathroom, hypothetically.
There's a huge difference between opposing a presidency rolling back protections of a disadvantaged group because it might lead to negative outcomes for marginalized people, and preventing marginalized people from using the bathrooms of their choice, even though studies indicate that they're actually a disproportionately less of a threat to the people who use those restrooms. There's a huge difference between being a watchdog that overlooks the government's ability to harm marginalized people and disliking trans people, so you throw forth a bathroom bill because you throw forward some hogtied story about how little girls will see a boy dressed as a girl and then they'll get raped or something. There's no
that
evidence
actually has happened.
Lots of things have happened, but statistically speaking, it hasn't happened nearly enough to even put them on par with the general population. And what's more, rape is already illegal. We didn't need to prevent trans people from using the bathrooms of their chosen gender.
This sounds unrelated, but I have kind of a point here. When it comes, I know that we have some disagreements when it comes to pronouns, using people's pronouns. Am I correct in the assumption that you would say if somebody wants you to use the proper pronouns, whether you agree with it or not, you should just use their proper pronouns because it's respectful and it makes them more comfortable? Would you agree with this?
I use their gendered pronouns of people's desire. I use they, them for non-standard pronouns. I haven't really bought into the he, she thing, but that's because I have contention with some esoteric aspects of gender theory that have very little to do with this conversation. In every interaction in my life with a non-gender conforming person, I have used pronouns of their choice, yes.
Right. Okay. So you believe that people, if someone, is non-binary or identifies differently, you should use the pronouns of their choice because it's respectful and makes them comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely.
So my question is, even if that isn't based on fact or logic or whatever,
it is.
Let's just okay. However, this seems to be prioritizing the feelings of transgender people over the feelings of other people.
It is not.
For example, young girls might be uncomfortable at the sight of a male presenting female or whatever you want to call them in their women's bathroom. So why are we using the comfort for people as an argument when it comes to the pronouns, but then we're fine ignoring someone's discomfort when it's in favor of transgender people?
Well, this is a very dishonest equivocacy, and I'd like to explain why. The main reason why, essentially, is because, for one, nobody is trying to legislate people to force them to use pronouns. The only ways in which that has been legislated is through the inclusion of trans people into the protected classes, so on and so forth, if you're an employer or a rentier. But no one is out here making laws saying that you'll get a fine if you don't use the proper pronouns of a trans or gender nonconforming person. And for two, there's a huge difference between respecting a person's personal identification in a way that lends them respect and credence in humanity and perpetuating what is essentially disgust against the existence of trans people. That argument you just made, a girl might be confused or made worried by seeing a trans
or might be uncomfortable.
Girl. Right, yeah, or made uncomfortable. You can make the exact same argument for interracial marriages 50 years ago. There are types of discomfort. There's the kind of discomfort that exists when you're a marginalized trans person who's shit on by basically every element of society and reinforced through the pronoun usage people decide to, ignore in many cases, and the kind of discomfort that comes when a little girl realizes, oh shit, girls can have penises, which wouldn't really, happen. There's stalls in women's restrooms, but even if they saw a square-jawed woman in their restroom or something like that.
No, I understand where you're going with this, but I'm just trying to explain how I think that there tends to be an overarching agenda where we prioritize other people's comfort over the comfort of someone else.
Not. Well, for one, again, it's a dishonest comparison because there's no legality being forced in regards to one. And for two,
there's legality being enforced as far as the transgender people being allowed to use the bathroom.
But that's being enforced by the conservatives. Before, bathrooms were a gendered thing. You use the bathroom of your gender. There are trans women who look very authentically cis and trans men who look very authentically cis who use the bathrooms of their assigned gender. To put in forth legislation which forces them to use the other bathroom lest they suffer a pine is a massive infringement of their personal rights, which I would think you would be against. And to say that you would do so because of the discomfort.
I am against it when you phrase it that. I am against it that way when you phrase it that way because, for example, I've said this since the beginning. Authentic transgender people who pass, right? Like Blair White, for example.
Wait. Trans is a mode of identification. Even if you don't pass, you're still trans.
Well, I'm saying as far as passing transgender people, they've been using the bathroom of their choice since the beginning. A lot of the times I think we're seeing this resistant because there's other legislation trying to be passed that allows people to use the bathroom of their choice. For example, if you were one day to wake up and say you identify as a woman, you think you should be able to walk into the women's bathroom?
Oh yeah, unquestionably. If it's authentic, then yeah. Yeah,
So
definitely.
how do you prove that it's authentic?
Well, that's the thing. You can't. There's no way to. Unless you want to do like genital checks and like chromosomal scans on every person using the restroom, there's no way to 100% know somebody's gender and birth sex when they're using a restroom. It seems like the easiest way, and scientific research proves this seems to be a very safe way of doing things, is just to let people use the restrooms they want to use. And the government infringing on that ability is, I would consider to be a violation of human rights. I can't imagine like being in support of the government legislating people's ability to use facilities that they were previously able to use, which was motivated not by scientific rigor, but rather by disgust. It's disgust. These people aren't.
I mean,
using
all that's
data.
really happened is the federal enforcement of these laws have been rolled back, and it's now being left up to the states. I think that's the way it should be as well. I don't think this is an issue that should be enforced on a federal level.
So you abhor federal authoritarianism, but when the government takes its hands off and says, okay, states, now you have the freedom to oppress, you're okay with that?
I mean, what you're calling oppression, I think that it should be left up to the states. This goes back to what I was saying before, is
that's oppression. Yeah, it is oppression. It's literally the state legislating to restrict the rights of a marginalized group of people. It's unquestionably a form of state oppression, just because it's happening at a state level rather than a federal level. I mean, fuck, I live in California. California has more power, more wealth, more people than a lot of countries in Europe. If the state of California wants to deny me some rights, I don't see why that shouldn't be treated as seriously as a federal authoritarian act.
I'm not saying it shouldn't be treated as seriously. What I am saying is that transgender people who pass as the gender they identify as have already been using the bathroom. My issue is when it's people that are clearly not female or clearly not attempting to even pass. Well, I mean, you can look at. Do you know who Blair White is?
Yes, I know Blair White.
Right. So Blair White.
I know that there are passing trans women and less passing trans women.
Right.
How
so
do
if
you
I saw
know
Blair White in the men's
identity?
bathroom, that would be weird.
Well, that is exactly what would happen with the legislation that has been proposed. Blair White being in the men's bathroom.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the legislation began because there were first policies and legislation being introduced to allow people of their gender identity to use the bathroom of their choice, despite the fact that this was already happening for ages and nobody really batted an eye.
That doesn't matter.
I think the problem,
even if state oppression is prompted by people trying to reinforce their rights at a state level, that doesn't mean the state oppression is valid.
I'm not saying it's necessarily valid. I'm just saying it's important to look at how it began.
Yeah, but it doesn't change the fact. Like, would you be okay with like the 14th Amendment being rolled back and the government saying, "All right, states, now you're free to decide whether or not slavery is legal"?
I think that's a bit of a false equivalency.
Well, no, it's not. It's a very
policy.
No, it's a direct one-to-one, because you said you oppose authoritarianism, but now you're saying that as long as it's left up to the states, if they vote in authoritarian measures, that's okay. So I think this is actually a direct equivocacy. As a supporter of freedom, I want the government to protect people's rights at a federal level so states with more regressive attitudes can't roll back protections that people have enjoyed in other states. I want it to be as secure as possible for transgender people to be able to use the bathrooms of their choice, for black people to be able to marry white people, for gay people to be able to marry other gay people. I don't want the states deciding this. I don't want freedom to be decided by the particulars of my locals. I want the broadest, most representative, most powerful institution in the planet to look down at the states beneath it and to say, you may not discriminate against these people. They are free to do with their lives as they choose. That to me is freedom.
And I would the only reason I'm arguing against this, that sounds all nice and dandy, but the problem is there's third parties involved here. There are other people that might be made uncomfortable, and we already established that you're fine with people conforming their language for the comfort of other people.
The discomfort of people when not suffering harm is not sufficient to deny a marginalized group their rights.
So a marginalized group's discomfort should be prioritized over the discomfort of the
A
general population?
marginalized group's liberation should be prioritized over the discomfort of people who are not being harmed by their existence. Your argument, I know you don't think it right now, your argument is identical to arguments against gay marriage and against miscegenation, interracial marriage. I know you don't think that, but this is literally the same argument. In all cases, and we can probably go back further too, back to women's suffrage and anti-slavery, the same argument has been made. How can you say you're in favor of egalitarianism when you prioritize the feelings of black people, gay people, women's voters, what have you, over the comfort of the straight cisgender white male, the landowner, the man, what have you? It's the same argument back through time. And I say to all of these things that no, freedom does not wait on the comfort of the bigoted. All of us, whether or not we're comfortable with it, should live in a society which treats everyone equally. And
I agree that everyone should be treated equally. However, I also think that you're taking a completely wrong approach with this by labeling people who are against a man using the women's bathroom
it'd be a woman,
as bigoted. I just think that's a very a poor route to take.
Well, it's a woman using a woman's bathroom, and they've been doing this for ages. This has been happening for a long time.
I know it's been happening.
So why is it?
Why
prevent it?
I don't think. Here's the issue. Here is. It was fine for authentic trans people to be using the bathroom.
Stop using authentic. That doesn't mean anything.
Use authentic.
You're trans if you identify as a gender.
Transgender people.
Okay, so you believe that non-passing transgender people should not be able to use the restrooms of their choice?
I think that if it's in public, it makes the most sense to use the bathroom with what the observable qualities that you have.
I agree. No, I agree with that. And I know trans people IRL, and they tend to do that too. For instance, there are people who just recently realized they're trans, and for a while they're still going to use the restroom of their assigned gender, just because it smooths things over. It's easier for them. But I think they should have the choice to. And to institute state legislation to prohibit that is government oppression. It is authoritarianism. There's no way around that. There's no interpretation of that where it isn't. It just is.
I think this goes back to a discussion on gender versus sex, which is another thing that we've disagreed on before.
We can disagree on it, but if we do, you'll be buried. Do you want me to list organizations that medically and scientifically recognize the difference between gender and sex?
No, I'm not saying there's not a difference. I think that gender is socially constructed to a degree. So I think that we actually have some common ground here.
Okay, no, never mind.
But I also think that gender has biological and evolutionary roles as well. I think that evolution and biology plays significant roles in specific gendered behavior.
Okay, first let's ground our definitions here. And whether or not, whatever conclusions we arrive at here, that doesn't change the fact that trans bathroom bills are state authoritarianism designed to prevent a marginalized group of people from using facilities they've been able to use in the past. And that it's motivated not through actual concern of people's well-being, because studies disagree with the fear-mongering, but by fear-mongering. And it's the same type of argument that's been leveraged against every marginalized community anytime it looks like they're getting rights. This is a very common historical cycle. A dialectic, one might say. But if we're to talk about gender and sex, let's ground our definitions here. So to me, and this is a very academic topic, so there's always going to be some contention, but to me, sex refers to the physiological, biological characteristics of a human being insofar as they relate to sexual dimorphism. It's a bimodal system, not binary. There are examples of people who don't perfectly adhere to the male XY, the female XX, but generally speaking, we've got men and women. And then gender is a set of social expectations which surround the sexual dichotomy. There are things like what we dress, how we act, what kind of food we should so on and so forth. And these things are not at all biological. They are instead social derivations of the roles we interpret from one's sexual identity. Would you agree with that definition?
I would partly agree with it. I think that there is certain gender expression and gender behavior that you would consider a social construct that still has a biological and evolutionary component to it.
Yeah, I agree. There are genetic components that express themselves socially and vice versa. I would agree. But give me an example. What's like a gender thing that you would consider to be like more of an evolutionary trait than a social trait?
Sure. So I think that males exhibiting dominance, assertiveness, and chivalry, for example, is a more of an evolutionary and biological trait.
Well, I can point to examples of societies in the past where women were actually expected to be the sexually dominant ones. There were some Grecian city-states, and believe it or not, Vikings being good examples where domestically women were actually expected to be the sexually domineering, the suave, the confident, the such and such.
Sure, but the reason I argue this from an evolutionary standpoint is we can actually see this kind of gendered behavior in other forms of nature as well.
Well,
For
there are
example,
plenty of animals where the females are very big and dominant. Hyenas.
right, but well, of course, I mean, I don't like to bring nature into this because I understand we're not the same as animals, but I do think lobsters are the best example because lobsters have similar brains to humans in the sense that we test antidepressants on them, and lobsters exhibit gendered behavior like male dominance and male hierarchies and assertiveness. They fight for dominance and so forth, and this gendered behavior has existed since lobsters, which are estimated to be anywhere from like 300 to 600 million years before humans. This gender behavior has existed before trees. And if you want to take this from an evolutionary standpoint, which is the approach that I'm taking, one of the truths within Darwinism is what constitutes real is what's existed for the longest time.
Yeah, we don't usually use Darwinist theory to like determine social roles, but while I admit I'm not that
I understand
familiar.
we don't use Darwinist theories to determine social roles,
Well, we
but
do
some of these
if you're
but
not
some
safe,
of
they
these
like that.
some of these roles that you're claiming are purely socially constructed, I'm arguing still have a biological and evolutionary component
Well,
to
I
them.
admit I'm not that up on my lobster science, but I would argue that those are sex roles, because it is possible for there to be sexual distinctions, which instinctually motivate different kinds of behavior. I would argue that gender pertains only, and this could just be a definitional kerfluffle. I would argue that gender refers exclusively to things, not nature, instead things which we are endowed through our environment, through engagement with other members of our own species. So, for example, I don't think a human just born out in the wilderness alone, I don't believe this human would have a gender. I think it would be a genderless human being.
I would disagree with you with that because we're able to witness gender behavior in tiny children. In fact, there's two studies that I'm looking at right now that it says these two studies argue that gender understanding must not play an important role in the emergence of gendered behaviors because some gender type behaviors emerge prior to age 2, presumably earlier than children's understanding or identification with gender.
I mean, I've read
NIH.gov.
I've read studies saying that gendered socialization of children takes place as early as in the womb. So I can speak on this somewhat authoritatively because this was one of the subjects of my study. The separating gender from sex is one of the most complicated and difficult sociological pursuits in human history because the ways in which we influence the gendered self-perception of a newborn, even somebody in the womb, are so minute and so complicated that to raise a person absent that environment would violate like an ethics board. You would have to put them in the Goku hyperbolic time chamber where they're born like after 9 months of silent pregnancy, and then you just drop them in there and occasionally let in like some baby food through a vat. It'd be really, really difficult to do. So I agree that there is a lot of difficulty in the separation here, but we can step back past that because we recognize that naturalism is a fallacy. We don't have to constrain ourselves to that which we believe to be, well, natural. I would argue that, yeah, maybe people born with penises and denser bone assigned male at birth, like me and you, that we maybe exhibit tendencies towards aggression more frequently, and that might be like a sexual thing, and there are probably aspects of gender which can be extrapolated from that, but broadly I would agree that's, well, genetic. But I don't think that should change the fact that no matter how we act or why we act the way we do, that people's behaviors are valid as long as they're not harming others. And
don't you think that, I mean, you go into this whole spiel about how complicated separating gender and sex are, and it seems like you're having a hard time even explaining it to me. Yet a lot of these people who identify as non-binary, for example, which I think is probably a debate for another time, expect society to conform to them at a certain level as well.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking,
that in and of itself is problematic.
I mean, there are no, they're just asking you use their pronouns. I don't know how their request...
I know that we can always bring up some examples of things happening in the UK with people actually being imprisoned for using the wrong pronoun. And I'm not referring to the same argument that I used in the transgender video, which you incorrectly labeled as harassment when it was actually about the misgendering.
No, it was it wasn't just misgendering. It was a massive public figure. All right.
Let me finish my point. This is an entirely different story. It comes from Daily Mail, where a mother was arrested in front of her children and locked up for 7 hours after referring to a transgender woman as a man online.
Chat, can you look that up?
You just by your own.
I mean, from the Daily. I mean, you do realize you just unironically cited a Daily Mail link at me, right? Daily Mail links are like a crapshoot.
This story comes. Go read it from a different source if you don't.
Well, please, yeah, somebody from chat look that up, because 90%, because you lie a lot in your videos, so I need to make sure. Okay, we can get that up. No, I don't think that that non-binary people like asking that you use their pronouns is in any way a problem.
When there's legal implications for not following,
I would need to look at the specific laws. I would need to look at the specific laws. But even if everything you just said is true, the amount of shit that trans people get on a day-to-day is infinitely worse than whatever potential consequences there are that might come about from us trying to address it.
You just got done saying that you oppose state-enforced oppression.
Yes,
and
no, well, hold on. Whoa.
I think that forcing people to speak, to use the language that someone else demands they use, or else they will face legal implications. For example, this woman who was detained is, as far as I'm concerned, still under investigation. She still remains under investigation. That is not a good thing. And you also were just able to admit to me how complicated the separation of gender and sex are. You can't, I mean, you majored in it and you can barely explain
what you're
it to
essentially
me,
saying to me. No, what you realize the equivocacy you just made here, right? What you're saying to me is that because you've procured a Daily Mail article of somebody being thrown in the slammer for 7 hours, that it's ridiculous for non-binary people to ask you use their pronouns and to do so as oppression.
I'm not saying that is not the ridiculous aspect of it, Vosh. Don't strawman what I'm saying here. It's fine for them to ask you to use certain pronouns. And you know what? If I were going to go out to dinner...
Here, we got it. Apparently, the woman in the article that you were referring to here didn't just misgender a person online. High court papers obtained by the Mail on Sunday detail how Mrs. Scotto is accused of a campaign of targeted harassment against Miss Hayden, allegedly motivated by her status as a transgender woman. So this isn't just accidentally misgendering somebody. This is a campaign of targeted harassment done online. The same kind of thing that would warrant some police look into here in the States, too.
I would. What source is that from?
That I'm pretty sure that's in the Daily Mail. Hold on. Chat coming in clutch.
I would be really curious to see what other details there are, because a lot of the times if people are critical of transgender people online, it's branded as a hate campaign. I'm saying that a lot of times if people are critical of transgender people, it's branded as some kind of hate campaign. And this is just one of the examples that I found. There are other examples as well of people facing legal repercussions for refusing to use the proper pronouns. And I know that the law
but this was a targeted hateful harassment campaign on the basis of this person being trans. Apparently they made multiple accounts to harass, defame, and publish derogatory and defamatory tweets about Miss Hayden, including referring to her as a male. This is very clearly deliberate, targeted harassment over.
I agree that
their
that
identity.
Level of targeted harassment is not a good thing.
But you linked it at me. You just linked it at me to support your argument.
Let me finish what I'm saying. I think that the reason she's facing the most legal repercussions is still from the misgendering, and even more so,
it's from the harassment. Misgendering isn't illegal in the UK. Harassment is.
Even more so, there have been other instances where people face legal repercussions for using the wrong pronouns. And
you find them?
I know that there's I'm not going to go here and start Googling
But that's
stuff
the thing.
right now,
But this is the problem that I have every time I talk with people about this. I can point to instances of state discrimination, and I can point to meta-analyses of the status of trans people in the Western world where they face massive systemic issues. And then people come at me and they're like, okay, but did you hear how this one person got arrested for misgendering someone? And then it turns out that it wasn't even for misgendering. It was targeted harassment. This is what happens every time.
It's not always targeted harassment.
Okay.
You always try to brand it as targeted harassment.
Can you
just like
find
the example
me
I made in the
data?
just like the argument I made in the video that you responded to, which most of your responses, let's be honest, were very incorrect. You tried to claim that it was not for the misgendering, it was actually for harassment. But when you actually watched the clip and read through the article, it was very clear that the harassment quote was deemed as the misgendering.
No,
Even
it wasn't.
more so,
it wasn't just misgendering. It was a campaign made by a public figure against a nobody.
It wasn't
trans
actually
girl.
that article specifically was not a campaign made against anyone. It was a public journalist offering her opinion on someone who was also a public figure.
If a public journalist went after the daughter of a charity manager, saying that she's a man, using he pronouns, saying that their genitals were mutilated and that they've been brainwashed, and this person is a journalist, yeah, I am 100% in favor of the police putting a stop on that. Are you fucking kidding me? Yeah, absolutely. And we would
those examples you've given me don't even sound like that bad. They sound like something that is just someone else's opinion.
But that's the problem. You're lying every time you describe these events. Every time you're like, oh, well, someone got misgendered and now they're being no, it's harassment. You lie all the time in your videos.
I don't lie, Vaush. You lie where you brand it harassment, because that article
that's literally why the police followed up on it. They made a
article okay. Try and calm down, Vaush. You're getting really hyper here.
I'm just an excited kind of person.
Some of the article that I used in my LGBT insanity video, which you responded to, right? Mm-hmm. That article you claimed was because of harassment. And your logic for this was they didn't say misgendering once in the article. Hunter made a mistake by saying it was about misgendering. Well, if you want to apply your same logic, and I did this in my response video, I'm not sure if you even watched it or not.
I did a stream on it. I was delighted that you recognized me. It was my senpai.
I explained that harassment was not in the article either. And when you actually watch the clip and watch what the journalist was saying, it was largely stemmed from the misgendering.
I strongly disagree with this assessment. What they described unquestionably fits the standard of harassment in the United States. I can't speak to the United Kingdom.
Saying on Twitter that someone's genitals were mutilated, that's just a harsh way of saying the truth.
No, it's not.
So if a transgender person walks in to get a sex reassignment surgery and they have I've seen how transgender surgeries go down. The tip of the penis is removed.
Okay, I'm familiar. It's actually, mind you, an extremely complicated and near miraculous surgery that's taken decades to refine. So I think mutilated is.
You know what? I understand that it's a tough surgery, and you know what? I'm actually in support of transgender trans people transitioning, because for a lot of them that's what helps.
Okay, here's a question. Here's a question for you, okay? If a public journalist in the United States of America, somebody with a large public following and some sort of institutional reputation, started making tweets about how an interracial couple that journalist had a problem with was going to have a kid soon, and that kid was going to have a lower IQ because of the interracial union, and they started tweeting about that and saying stuff like fucking mulatto kid, do you think that would constitute like enough for the people to be like, yeah, that's probably harassment, maybe we should look into that?
I mean, maybe if they personally want to look into it, but I honestly think that just sounds like someone sharing a very bigoted racist opinion online.
Okay, well that woman was sharing a very bigoted transphobic opinion online.
That stuff's already happened. There have been plenty of public journalists who have gone after Barron Trump, for example.
Journalists with huge quote. Well, no. There's a big difference between a journalist talking about the son of I'm sorry, was the grandson or was it son? Wait, can you remind me?
Son.
Son of the President of the United States of America, and a public figure targeting a nobody. There's a huge power differential there.
As far as my understanding, I don't believe they were a nobody. This woman was a top name, a big advocate for transgenderism, and she had been on a television show. That's how the journalist even found out about her.
In relation to her relationship with her mother, she does not have the institutional power to defend herself in the same way that Trump does right now. And I would consider that and the racial argument both instances of harassment. Yeah, 100%. I'm in favor of that. I come down pretty stringent on free speech protection. I'm pretty big on free speech. I don't know. I'm an anarchist. I'm not in favor of state power in any way, shape, or form. But if I have to choose between a world in which trans people are systemically discriminated against and in one in which that is being fixed, but there are some overreaches in which some people get accused of harassment when maybe they shouldn't, I would take the latter world any day of the week. Because those protections, those hyperbolic instances of state aggression, they're temporal and they're not nearly as bad as what trans people are going through. I'm willing to take that.
Are you willing to admit that you prioritize a marginalized group's feelings and rights over the rights of other people? You just said you don't care if people are even wrongly accused of harassment because transgender people have been through a lot of shit.
No, I didn't say I don't care, only that one is much worse than the other. I think
even if one is much worse, you want to be consistent here, right? So either do you want to be consistent, or are you willing to admit that you value the rights and the comfort of marginalized people over the rights and the comfort of other people?
No, because that's a massive false equivalency of what I just said right there. I think that in the process of building up respect and institutional support for a marginalized community, there will occasionally be instances of overreach, which are in total substantially less harmful to everyone than the oppression it's seeking to address.
You still agree the overreach is not a good thing, right?
I don't like the overreach, but it is preferable. Like, for instance, I don't like that Count Dankula got fined for his little fucking Nazi pug video, okay? I agree that the overreach is bad. I don't like the overreach. But I prefer the overreach to a world in which marginalized communities have no institutional support.
So for somebody who claims to hate state oppression, you're fine with there being overreach as long as it's in favor of a marginalized group. Just admit it, Vosh. Don't try to pussyfoot around it.
Wait, I'm not dancing around any words. I'm making my position extremely clear. Yes, some state overreach might be helpful at times in addressing the marginalized status of a marginalized community. All right,
so that's a direct contradiction of what you said earlier, where you said I am adamantly opposed of state oppression.
So do you think if a person says they're adamantly opposed to violence, but then they have to defend themselves after being approached by somebody with a knife in the back alley of a bar, would you then accuse them of being a hypocrite because they have found the instance? No, it's not, because you found an instance in which they have had to engage in something they dislike very much.
That's
in order
different.
To protect.
That's on an individual basis, and that's somebody defending themselves.
No. In both instances, there is a principle that somebody tries to adhere to. However, in the face of something much worse, they are willing to make an exception. That's not inconsistent. Nothing that I said here is inconsistent.
I think that mentality, Vosh, is such a major flaw within the LGBT community.
No. I can't let you get away with this, because this is what you people do. No. Please, Hunter, my friend, my good friend. It is not about prioritizing the feelings. They are institutionally discriminated against. And what people like you do is you look over the institutional discrimination. I could provide you link after link, study after meta-analysis of the many ways in which LGBTQ people are oppressed in this country and in other places in the West, and then you all impotently throw your hands up and you say, but somebody got arrested for the tweet, and then it turns out it wasn't even for dead naming. No, that is what happens.
Now you're
No, listen, please. In order for you to make the argument you're trying to make, you would need to indicate that the overreach by the state to protect trans people is more harmful to the world than the stuff they're trying to protect trans people from. But there is no evidence of that, and you'll never be able to find it because it doesn't exist.
So in your mind, what would be the perfect balance then?
Wait, I don't want a perfect balance at all. Ideally, I want trans people to not be oppressed. But if in the process of them no longer being oppressed, we can maybe the state gets a little over here a couple times, but trust me, there's plenty of criticism every time the state does anything related to pronouns, okay? This is hardly an non-discussed issue. Yeah, I would take that reality over one in which trans people can never meaningfully get their voice out because everything they do is posited as an example of their feelings being preferred over cis people. You unironically tried to argue that opposing a state authoritarian bathroom bills is an instance of prioritizing trans people's feelings over cis people. That's such a dishonest framing.
Oppression is a suppression of rights. If it's a private business, transgender people don't even have the right to use certain bathrooms. Just like I might not have the right to use certain
Protected
bathrooms.
classes in the United States of America prohibit employers from discriminating against people for a wide variety of characteristics, including, according to an interpretation by the Supreme Court in the past decade, transgender people. They don't have that right. The state was trying to impose the right for people to discriminate against trans people in an instance of authoritarianism. And I am so happy to be part of a group of people, whether that be the leftist community or Democrats or trans people or whatever, that recognizes that for what it was, which was bigotry coming in the way of a group of people's rights. Because that's what it was. There was no data on this. It was bigotry.
Well, I will concede that point. I agree that I haven't debated the bathroom thing in quite a while, and I will admit that there were certain things about the bathroom policies that I think you explained well. However, I don't think that deters from my broad point, which is that you, along with many people in advocates for the LGBT community, seem to prioritize and listen, here's the thing. I think that a lot of the times these rights do come down to feelings at the end of the day. I brought up the pronouns thing because we've seen different instances of this, and I'm not gonna change my opinion on that because there have been enough instances of people who have faced legal repercussions. And I know that this law that was passed in California a few years ago about punishing people who use the wrong pronouns is sometimes taken. I know it's sometimes taken out of context.
I live in California. I can tell you it's fine over here. Those are for certain institutions. They're not. I agree. I agree that there are problems sometimes with how protections for transgender and other LGBT communities are implemented. Again, I am contrary to what you just implied. I am critical of state power, but I want to have an honest discussion of those things rather than unironically citing trans people's or cis people's feelings as an argument against the bathroom bill, or how can I respect?
Citing trans people. I'm not actually citing.
But you didn't just. But you didn't just do that.
Glaring hypocrisy in your logic.
Well, it's not. I just explained how it's not hypocritical. It's called a threshold. There is a point at which I agree that even state intervention is necessary. It's a very reasonable moral position to take. But you didn't just take that position. You already also took the position. You were like, well, what about non-binary people and their pronouns? And I said, yeah, I use their pronouns. And you were like, well, look at this. People are going too far. The government's. I want to have a reasonable discussion about this.
You do this so many times in your videos where you take what I say, you extrapolate it into an entirely different situation, and then you make fun of that situation while completely ignoring the actual point.
We can get to the root.
Can I finish what I'm saying?
No, you can't.
I'm going to finish what I'm saying. I'm going to go ahead and finish what I'm saying. So my point was, you are fine with people changing their language, changing what they might be comfortable with to refer to people with their preferred pronouns for the other person's comfort and to respect them. So we take the feelings of non-binary people into account when talking about this. However, then the feelings of cis people who might be uncomfortable at the sight of someone who presents as a man, I'm using your terminology now, presents as a man in the women's bathroom, that goes completely out the window because, and correct me if I'm wrong in this last statement, you're fine with a little bit of overreach so long as it protects transgender people.
Yeah, and this is, you know what, and spoken exactly like a Jim Crower in the 1950s. Exactly the same logic. You think that the comfort of black people on the streets is more valuable than the comfort of white folk who might not want to see these Negroes walking about this fine city street?
It's not at all the same.
It is identical. It's the language of bigotry, and it's applied every single time. I don't.
It is a very specific context I'm talking about. I'm not
literally the same.
I am not saying that transgender people shouldn't be walking down the street because someone might get upset.
Just walking in the bathroom
within bathrooms specifically, this is where the debate is focusing. So let's not extrapolate again.
Yeah, you want separate but equal in the back. No, that was a joke. No, it's exactly the same. In both instances, the argument being made here is that the abolitionist, the black rightser, the trans rightser, I am saying I prioritize the comfort of the slave, the black man, the trans woman over the comfort of the hegemonic person, the cisgender white man. And I say to you, yes, I don't care for the comfort of bigots. And I do care not for the comfort of trans people, but for their institutional validity and letting them use the bathrooms of their gender identity, which they have been doing for decades, or whichever bathrooms they want to use, frankly. That is one of the ways to assert their institutional legitimacy. And I stand by that.
I tried to, right. And honestly, what you just said right there makes complete sense to me. But I tried to explain this earlier, but I think it may have been taken out of context. I'm aware that transgender people have been using the bathrooms of their choice for decades, and I'm fine with that. I believe the pushback came from legislation that was actually trying to be passed to allow anyone who might identify as anything to use the bathroom of their choice.
That's already what people can do.
I understand that's already what people can do, but this was federal legislation to force people to allow anyone.
So you're okay with state oppression as long as it's in response to federal non-oppression? I'm not sure if I understand.
No, I think that you're taking me out of context.
Well, no, because you just said I support the right for people to use the bathrooms of how they choose, and then you went on to form a defense for legislation which would be the state preventing people from using the bathroom of their choice.
It was I think it's one of those things that was, it's kind of like, why can't we just let it be? People are already using the bathrooms of their choice. This pushback only arose from a federal attempt to force businesses or schools or companies to allow people who identify as men to use the women's bathroom. And there have been instances where people are made very uncomfortable. For example, there was a man that was using the women's locker room, and I saw I saw this guy. All right, he looked like a dude in a wig.
But I don't care about individual anecdotes. I use studies to reinforce my points, and the studies show that this is not a threat to like cis girls.
I understand where you're coming from the threat. I'm trying to show you the contradictions within your own logic. But there's not.
What contradiction? What contradiction? Lay it out for me.
I already explained it with the non-binary pronouns and their feelings versus the feelings of cis people.
No, it's about the institutional. Why do you keep reducing it to feelings? I like people's feelings. I don't want anyone's feelings to get hurt. But I don't think the discomfort of people who are not an oppressed group should be used as an excuse to reinforce the oppression of that oppressed group. If I did so, I would have to agree that, yes, if there's some small Alabaman town that doesn't really like black people walking around, then they should be able to use that argument in favor of keeping black people out of their public spaces. That logic is perfectly congruent in both instances. There are other iterations of your argument which are different from the whole keeping black people out of the public space argument, but that one you just made, prioritizing one group's comfort over another, is identical to arguments made by people in support of.
That is what you're doing.
I'm not. You're literally. Listen, okay, wait, hold on. If we just disagree on this, Can I lay out a central thesis here?
Do you want to? Yeah, we can keep talking about this, or we can move on, because I'm also interested to hear what you have to say about how apparently I further bigotry.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Okay. So listen, my problem, and this is the problem I have with a lot of reactionary YouTube. Okay. The problem is that there are
which I would actually argue I'm not a reactionary either.
All right. There are very real problems going on in society today. It's very easy to get caught up in this liberal myth that we live in this utopian, everyone's treated basically the same, it's all fine. But in reality, when you look at like stats, there are huge problems in this country, from immigrants, black folk, trans folk, LGBT people, even problems that affect the hegemonic majority, like the suicide rate for white boys. Like there are real problems here. And the problem is that our ability to solve these problems relies on people having the right attitudes towards them. And I don't think that your content precludes that attitude. I think your content does everything in its power to destroy that attitude. Because what you do, and you gotta admit this is what you do, is when you make a video, you find like a couple instances of the gays going too far, or the feminists going too far, or the BLMers going too far, and you like take a couple of quotes or tweets or whatever, or like a news article, and then you spend like 4 minutes like responding to it where you essentially call them dumb, and I don't fault you for that. I mean, that's my content too. But what you're doing when you do that, when you talk about, I'm in favor of LGBT rights, but these ones have gone too far. The gay hate mobs preventing all comedians from so on and so on. What you're doing is reinforcing the values of people who actually do hate LGBT people, which is the reason why whenever I do a video of yours, I get people down in the comments who aren't just calling me a libcuck, soy boy, man bun, baby boy, which always happens, but I also get people saying shit like faggotry is degenerate and disgusting. It's the same reason why
that's not my problem. I'm not responsible for what my followers say, because I'm sure we could look down in your comment section and find some fans that have said some pretty mean, nasty things also.
True, but the difference is my content, I holistically address every element of my values, and I call out people who make bad extrapolations from my values, which is why I call out tankies and class reductionists literally all the time. Your content doesn't do that. Your content could be read as explicitly anti-LGBT, were it not for the fact that at the beginning and end you say, but seriously though, I don't hate LGBT people, I support their rights. And the fact of the matter is,
but I fight for their rights as well.
And you just argued in favor of the bathroom bills, but even if that were 100% the case, it doesn't change the fact that as a public figure, your words have impacts on people, and your content reinforces the mentality and the attitude of people who will agree that, yeah, you know what? Not only are gays treated fine in this country,
this is such a slippery slope. This is such a
it's not. No, it's not, because I don't do it.
One of the worst arguments.
No, because I don't.
Slippery slope argument.
Okay, so wait. Maybe we can go over some base questions. Do you think that you're responsible for the views you endow in your audience?
I think I'm responsible for the views that I hold myself. If someone is going to take me out of context or misunderstand what I'm saying to justify bigotry, that is not my fault.
Okay, we fundamentally disagree. And I can point, actually, you know what? Let's use an example of you engaging in a flat out lie. And I want to see why you did this, because this was very telling for me, okay? In your video, The Gays Strike Again, you complain about two things. You complain about the Kevin Hart Oscars controversy, and you complain about, what was it, Jake Paul or Jake Logan? I always forget his name.
Logan Paul, yeah.
Logan, thank you, fuck. Logan Paul doing some dumbass, I'm gonna be gay for a month shit, which I never cared about, and I think people made too much of a deal over it, okay? But the Kevin Hart thing, I think, was really telling, because, and let me go through here, and I'll give you all the time in the world to respond afterwards. You framed the Kevin Hart controversy as, he's a comedian, he made some jokes, cry bully gay people, hate mobs, tried to kick him off the Oscars to destroy this man's career. That's more or less, like, yeah, that's pretty much what you got at. What actually happened with Kevin Hart is that he made jokes in the past, like 10 or so years ago, saying that he would beat his son if he ever found out that he was gay. It wasn't
a joke.
Well, okay, yeah, okay, sure. Like, yeah, I'll gun down all the Negroes as a See, jokes.
I mean, there's edgy humor.
No, it wasn't edgy humor, dude, because he went on later to do a comedy routine where he joked about that if his son ever did any gay shit, he'd come down on that too. He made jokes about gay people having like a billboard for AIDS. He's made jokes in the further on about participating in movies where he made fun of gay people, AIDS, and anal sex. And then he was given an opportunity to apologize for all of those comments, which is fair, because
no,
just because something, no, it's not. Everything I'm saying is factual. Just because something is a joke doesn't mean it's also not a comment. I don't know why people make this like this lie, like just because something is a joke.
Here's the thing.
Jokes carry meaning. Well, I'm not done. I'm not done.
Okay.
I'm almost done. So in 2015, Kevin Hart said he wouldn't repeat his gay son jokes again today. When he was announced as the Oscar host, all of this came up. He refused to apologize. And then after going on to the Ellen show, he personally stepped down. So you framed this as people attacking him over a joke and then like getting him kicked off the Oscars.
I believe it was... Listen, in all fairness, it was my understanding that he stepped down because of the controversy.
Yeah, he did, because he refused to apologize for a decade of him saying that he would beat his gay son if he found out he was gay.
A joke he made.
No, it doesn't. That's not valid. It's jokes contain messages.
Jokes are extremely valid.
No,
if you're joking,
listen,
it's not serious.
You're ruining comedy when you say this, okay? The reason why comedy is important is because it carries messages that resonate with us. It carries information. It carries commentary. Comedians have throughout history been some of the most like cogent commentators on the state of things. But this goes back to the jesters back hundreds of years ago. And you're destroying all of that by saying, it's just a joke, guys. Jokes don't actually have, it's just a joke. It's just funny. It doesn't have a message. That's what comedy is. Comedy contains messages. And if the message you're presenting in your comedy over and over and over again is gay people are disgusting, riddled with AIDS, sodomy is degenerate, and I would beat my child if he turned out to be gay, those can be jokes and also be incredibly homophobic. Those are not mutually exclusive. And he had an opportunity to apologize.
Maybe they're considered homophobic jokes. However, to brand the guy as a homophobe is completely unfair.
No, it's really not.
Because jokes and comedy are not entirely telling of a person's character. And you might disagree with me on that, but the guy's a stand-up comedian. Do you really think he goes home and beats his son for showing? It
doesn't matter if he does. There are millions of people who watch his shit, and to see a public figure talking about how gay people are gross and they would beat their son, I don't give a fuck what he does personally.
This is just a slippery slope fallacy.
No, it's not. No, it's not slippery slope to say that people who joke about beating their gay son should be held accountable.
You're such a hypocrite, Vouch, because you don't even realize the same way this logic completely contradicts your earlier logic about the bathroom laws.
How?
For example, with the bathroom bills, part of my other argument is that men can take advantage of these policies, right?
No, they can't. Rape is already illegal. Rape is already illegal.
That. However, if someone is a rapist who wants to walk into the bathroom and rape somebody, it's not going to raise eyebrows nearly as much because they could do it.
No, it wouldn't raise eyebrows. No, this is such a scare tactic. It wouldn't raise eyebrows either way.
I know, it's a slippery slope.
No, it's not. No, you just lied what you did right there. The idea that right now, like a cisgender man could just walk into a woman's restroom to do some raping and everyone would stop him because everyone knows that's bad. But then if trans people were allowed to use the restroom of their choice, then everyone would like just let them in, and then they would have like 8 additional seconds before they started raping. The idea that this is like a preventative measure against crime is laughable and not backed up by data in any sense. You're arguing from feelings now.
I'm trying to argue that you are using the same logic that you're that you're accusing me of using with the bathroom things. How? Because when I say something bad could happen if we let, so a predator could walk in, it wouldn't raise eyebrows and it could end up getting someone raped. You would say that's a slippery slope fallacy, in which I would say, I agree.
No, I wouldn't. I would say that it's not statistically borne out in data, because I have data.
Is it statistically borne out in data that Kevin Hart's jokes led to more violence towards
No, but
people?
It's statistically borne out in data that making jokes about homophobia and other things like that do lead to more edgy, more homophobic views. Yeah, like actual homophobia. That has been borne out in data.
I'm very interested in seeing these
How can you not? Do you seriously believe that if you're trying to
I'm not just going to take your word for it, Vouch. You've shown a history of not being very honest.
Chat,
so I'd be very happy to see the studies.
What have I ever lied about? For one, chat, find that study. There have been multiple, and I know you can find it easily, okay? Because this is a very fucking easy point to prove. For two, what have I lied about?
Listen, you contradict yourself when you say...
No, I haven't. I have not made any contradictions. Please illustrate a direct contradiction that I have made.
Yes, the contradiction is when you say Kevin Hart makes jokes, therefore could lead to violence towards gay people. That is no different than me saying letting transgender people in the bathrooms could lead to rape.
Nope, the difference is, nice try, but the difference is I'm not advocating for state policy to prevent Kevin Hart or other people like that from making homophobic jokes. You were advocating for state policy to prevent trans people, and I can provide evidence showing that stuff like this does increase the risk of homophobia perpetuating itself in society. You cannot present evidence that letting trans women into women's bathrooms increases the likelihood of sexual assault. So you're wrong on 3 accounts there. Not only do I have evidence to support my claims, but in one, state involvement is present, and in the other, one is not. If you wanted evidence, here we go. My chat's filtering it in. Here's a study on how sexist humor can lead to more sexism, as in it perpetuates, furthers, and expands upon sexist ideology in a person's head. This is an extremely well-accepted sociological contention, and the reason for that is because all of our values, homophobia or otherwise, are products of society, and society can take many forms, one of them being the kind of comedy we consume. Yeah, if we consume comedy and there are people up there making jokes like, yeah, if I ever saw my kid playing with a dollhouse, I'd break it over his fucking head. If you watch that shit, and you watch shit from people who say stuff like that, yeah, you're going to feel worse about gay people than you would otherwise. Not 100%, but at least the likelihood is increased. This is a very, very commonly held. Here's APA research on the subject: derogatory humor as a delegitimization strategy in intergroup contexts. I don't know if you're interested in doing the whole fucking study read, but I have done a lot of research. Well, that's a lie. I've never done the research. I've looked at other people's research, but I'm familiar with this research. And this is why, even if everything I said right now wasn't true, you still lied in how you framed the Kevin Hart controversy. Because all you said was he made some jokes and the gay people got super mad and forced him off the Oscars, which is such an incredibly disingenuous framing of what took place that it's actually disgusting. And I can only believe that homophobia or like bigotry on your part is the motivating factor here. I don't know if it's like a money thing, because I know like reactionary politics, like you have to keep in lockstep with a certain set of values. I don't do that. I make edgy statements to get me canceled every fucking week, but I get it. I understand how capitalism works. I don't know if it's that, or if you do think in your head like maybe humor doesn't contribute, maybe all speech is equally valid and there's no such thing as bigotry anymore and everyone's equal, in which case, okay, I have data for that. I can't think of a morally consistent position you're taking on this.
I do understand the position where you're coming from. However, I think that it's dishonest for you to accuse me of lying when, first of all, I was not lying about anything. I explained the situation. I researched the situation beforehand as well. And what happened was Kevin Hart made some jokes a long time ago. People got mad. The controversy led to him getting kicked out of the office.
Why did they get mad?
Stepping down. They got mad because they dug up a bunch of old homophobic jokes.
Okay, so we agree the jokes are homophobic, right? So generally
the other
speaking,
issue, I'm not done talking here. The other issue is that there was a lot of inconsistencies. For example, Kevin Hart used the word faggot in one of his tweets, and then it was used as evidence that he's homophobic. Then we see other people, for example, Sarah Silverman called somebody a faggot. She dressed up as a Nazi one time. Sarah Silverman is viewed as a fine leftist politician, not politician, actress. She's allowed to be on late night shows or whatnot, but then when Kevin Hart does it, suddenly it's a problem.
Well, the reason for that is because Sarah Silverman hasn't made jokes about like attacking and assaulting and abusing her son if he turns out to be gay.
So how does that? Okay, well,
believe it or not, considering that a lot of gay youth are abused by their parents for being gay, I can understand why that might be a sensitive topic. And I can understand
also realize that for the joke to even be like perceived as funny, you have to actually first believe that assaulting gay people is wrong.
No, I strongly disagree with that, and that's such a far reach. What?
I would be very interested.
You think that the subtext of Kevin Hart's jokes in which he said that you should beat your gay son, the joke, I've listened to the jokes.
Should. He said
no. Yeah, he said he would. You're right. He said he would. The joke there was very clearly disgusted gay people, not, oh, the abuse is hyperbolically bad, so I will demonstrate. That would be like, here's an example of what you just said, that in order like abuse would be bad. They'd be like, hey, my fucking gay kid really fucking pisses me off. I really want to beat the shit out of him. I saw him. He took the last of my fucking O's cereal. He took my fucking O's cereal, that little piece of shit. I wanted to punt kick his ass down the hallway. And the joke would be it has nothing to do with him being gay. The joke would be that the parent is hyperbolically demonstrating a violent response to a trivial matter. This wasn't that, dude. This was very clearly thinly veiled homophobia in a joke. And what my problem is that as somebody who enjoys humor, like a lot, even really edgy humor, you guys destroy humor by conflating all of these different things and saying that jokes can't be political, or this joke doesn't have this meaning because actually it was a humor, or he didn't mean that by that. No, jokes are an art form, and we should be able to critically discuss the impacts they have on society. All you do is obfuscate that when you say that he made jokes and gay people get mad over it. I'd get mad over it if it weren't for the fact that at the time this happened, I was busy with Nazi shit. I would get really fucking mad over it because a lot of gay kids are beaten by their parents. I have data on that too.
I understand that, but again, I think that's taking more of an emotional avenue with what you're saying.
Sure, yeah, no, I agree. That's why no one's talking about state oppression here. No one's saying the government should come down on Kevin Hart. What they were saying is that, hey, if you want to headline the Oscars, one of the biggest televised events in human history, we should probably make sure the person up there doesn't literally think it's okay to beat children if they're gay.
Doesn't literally.
Well, you don't know that. That's the thing.
Well, you don't know either.
No. Oh, no, neither of us know. But I can
that it's fine to go
inductively
beat your
reason.
gay son.
I can inductively reason, you see, because when somebody makes repeated jokes about beating their gay son, it might be reasonable before they go up on the Oscars to ask, hey, did you mean that? And instead of apologizing, he leaves himself.
He didn't apologize. First of all, it wasn't just someone asking him once or twice. It was, I think that Kevin Hart did the right thing in not caving to, yes, what I would consider a hate mob.
No,
people
this
dug up
is
a comedy
ridiculous.
sketch, got mad about a comedy sketch,
comedy sketches can be
apology.
no
That's
shit.
authoritarianism in and of itself.
Whoa. You just said some real dumb shit right there. What you're trying to do is silence their free speech. They have every right to protest and criticize a person for that person's speech. His speech was intensely homophobic. So gay people stand up and they say, hey, I disagree with this person who seems to be homophobic headlining the Oscars. And you think that's authoritarianism, their free speech? This is a ridiculous conflation.
You're right. I misspoke in the authoritarianism. However, I think that it's wrong that people, yes, they're allowed to use their free speech to criticize people, but I don't think we should be policing the speech of other people, especially if we're going to brand jokes that a comedian makes as some kind of,
jokes can be homophobic.
He literally thinks it's okay to beat gay people.
No, I said we don't know, and it would be nice to clarify. And yes, jokes can carry messages about a person's values. Have you ever hung out on 4chan's pull thread? Because they make a lot of jokes in there. And let me tell you, some of them's jokes provide insight into their political values, okay? If I look at a person on a pull thread talking about how the shekels, the goyim are taken back, and they do the echoes over everything, and they post the happy merchant picture, and then I say, hey, buddy, are you an anti-Semite? And they're like, whoa, buddy, those were jokes, along with the other 10,000 messages I posted on Jews wanting to control the West. Jokes have meaning.
So what about the jokes he's made about women, for example? Because he's made some pretty edgy jokes about women as well.
Yes, he has. And I'm not saying that all outrage against him needs to be equally proportional and needs to be like perfect, like 40% gay, 30% women, 25% non-binary, and 5% Inuit. Okay, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that he has every right to make his jokes, which I believe are totally homophobic, but he has a right to make them. People have a right to criticize him for that. And he, if he wanted that Oscar spot, should have apologized. And all he had to do was say, hey, I made those jokes a while ago. I wouldn't make them today. I understand how they could hurt some feelings or whatever. I don't want you to think that represents my values. I don't think it's okay to hurt gay people. And see you at the Oscars. And that was all that would have been needed. There still would have been people mad, of course, but people get mad at you and me all the time. We can deal with it. We're big boys. He's a celebrity. But he could have gone on to the Oscars. He took the L there.
Well, I think you're definitely oversimplifying the situation, if I'm being honest.
You described it as gay people getting mad over a joke and booting him off the Oscars. Don't accuse me of
gay people got mad over the joke, and it led to him leaving the Oscars. Is that not incorrect?
Well, it's an oversimplification. It is an oversimplification. It is technically correct, but I think it leaves out key info. For example, do you follow the migrant crisis going on in Europe? You never do any of this immigration, Western society bullshit, which is good, which is why I don't think you're a Nazi, thank God. But do you follow that stuff?
I follow it a little bit, yeah.
Okay, imagine
not enough that I could probably debate. I probably could not debate you on it.
No, trust me, me either. I'm totally fucking ignorant on it. But to get put a point out there, if somebody, the Cologne rapes back in 2016, the migrants, if somebody was like, I'm going to do a video on that, and they said, here are the Cologne rapes. Some people just got raped. All right, whatever. It wasn't even much rape. It was just people. There was some crime that happened. Okay. I would consider that, even though it technically supports my side of the aisle, to be a massive oversimplification because it leaves out details which can help people come to form their own conclusions. You left out those details. It's possible that if some of your audience, many of whom may have never heard of the Kevin Hart controversy before, had heard my take on it, which was not dishonest, it was just more expansive, they might have come to a different conclusion than the one you wanted them to come to. But you presented the information in a way to lead their conclusion. It's called manufacturing consent.
No, I think you're giving me, to be honest, I think you're giving me a little too much credit here. I was trying to explain the situation, and I was explaining why I think that it was wrong. And I do think it's wrong. I don't think that we should be policing comedians for making jokes. Listen,
but it's not policing. We're criticizing people for their speech, which is our free speech as well.
Right. I know that's fine. But again, I mean, he's a comedian. It's different than if you were caught saying it like in a hot
No,
mic.
it's
Like,
not.
for example,
It's not different.
it is different. Yes, it is.
No,
because
it's
the
not.
joke is not serious. That's a huge difference.
It doesn't. So again, in 4chan, when people keep making the Goyim, I see you've seen through my plot. When people are making the jokes with the happy merchant, or they make the jokes where they do the drawing of the black person with the huge lips and the watermelon, and they say, "Shit, I sure will love me some wire ass right now." When you look at that, would you look at that and think in your head, "Oh, it's a joke. There can't be any like problematic values here. It's just a joke."
I mean, I would have to have more context.
Have you not been on poll? Dude, jokes are a way of reinforcing negative values. Like a really common one. It's a really good way of slipping in ideas that a person might not necessarily agree with initially by getting them to laugh at the fundamental premises. It's like said.
What I would argue is if that's the case, which I thank you for giving me this study. I'm actually going to read up on it when we finish up this debate. But if that's the case, then how can you claim I'm responsible for anything when I make jokes about, I make jokes about everyone. I do honestly make jokes about everyone and everything.
Your jokes are pretty targeted, my dude. You don't.
I mean, if I'm talking about LGBT stuff, yeah, I'll crack a couple of jokes about LGBT stuff. But if I'm talking about white people, I'll crack some jokes about white people.
Yeah,
you jokes about black people.
You do crack jokes about black people. Not black people, white people. That's true. But when you do so, it's usually in a like, look, I take shots at all sides things.
No, it isn't. No, it's not. I literally make jokes about white people, forced to bring those up because people like you misinterpret what I'm saying. They think that because I make jokes that I somehow have all
Can
this
I wait, there's something I want to clarify. At the beginning of a video that you did, I don't remember its exact name. Let me go over my notes. It was either the gays strike again or it was no, I honestly forget the name, but you'll remember when I describe it. At the beginning of the video, you said something like, gay people are just like normal people. They might be anyone. They might be your husband. The only difference is they're going to hell. And then the next one is, white people are just like normal people. They could be anyone. Your hairdresser, your yoga instructor. The only difference is, at the end of the day, they're probably married to their cousin. Okay? And then you followed it up with, the only difference between those two jokes was that in one of them, the gays are going to get mad at me and get me canceled or whatever. And to an extent, I agree with that. I didn't have a problem with those jokes. I don't think that just because a joke is edgy or takes shots that it's necessarily a problem. I thought that joke was actually pretty funny. And I didn't have a problem with it. I think I did it on stream. Everyone saw. I was watching it, and I'm taking notes, and I look at that, and I let it go on by. I'm fine with that. I don't have a problem with edgy jokes. I'm not trying to silence anyone. What I want is for people to be free to hold others accountable for their language in the same way
they are free to do that.
Right, but then people like you will come out and accuse the second group of people of being like a hate mob, which I think is dishonest and frames it as though the second group of people is not appropriately leveraging their right to freedom of speech.
Well, I do think that they have a right to freedom of speech. Let's be very, very clear on that. I do think that people have a right to freedom of speech, and I think they have a right to criticize people. I do sometimes think that, we're going to have to agree to disagree on this one, because I do think that comedians making a joke is not the same as saying a serious statement.
No, I do agree.
That should be taken seriously. Obviously, if Kevin, listen, and let me explain this here. Let me clarify a little bit. If Kevin Hart was behind closed doors, maybe not even closed doors, just somewhere public, right? Having a conversation with someone, he's like, you know what, honestly, I think, or maybe actually even better, he's talking to an audience in a non-comedic way, saying, hey guys, you know what? I think we should go beat up some gay people. Let's go out there and beat up gays. That's a call to violence, and I would swiftly condemn that. I think that would be wrong. However, to make a joke, an edgy joke from a comedian who makes edgy jokes about women and a bunch of other people. I don't watch a lot of Kevin Hart, so
me either. I just familiarize myself with the controversy.
So I just think that this is a little bit of an exaggeration. I do think that the gay community blew it out of proportion. I think that a comedian who made a joke 10 years ago on Twitter where he called somebody a faggot isn't that big of a deal, especially when other people like Sarah Silverman have done the same thing.
Well, it was mostly the assaulting your gay kid thing, which he repeated multiple times, and he has kind of a
It was
history.
a comedy sketch.
I understand, but I understand. I agree that comedy is not exactly the same as saying like not. I agree that comedic statements are not identical to like flat statements. I do agree with that, and I do agree that we should be more understanding of comedic statements. I don't know if you follow. I recently attempted to make a comedic statement in which trans people were not necessarily the butt of the joke, but a subject of it. And it didn't get interpreted great. And I think that the fact that the comment was a joke should have maybe warranted slightly better treatment against me. But regardless, jokes carry meaning, and jokes have been for centuries ways of carrying through political values. There are studies on how jokes influence one's sincerely held belief, and all it would take is a cursory look at Poll or at 8chan or at Red Ice TV's comment section or any Nazi hub on the internet to see how jokes are a very, very common way for bigots to express their opinions in a way that gives them plausible deniability. It's a really common thing. That might be the case,
but I still think it is wrong and illogical to brand anyone that does make an edgy joke as a bigot.
But we're not doing that. We're not saying branding anyone who makes an edgy joke as a bigot. I make edgy jokes. I'm saying that jokes should be treated as what they are, statements which can carry political meaning, and that if a person repeatedly makes jokes targeting a specific group of people in which the punchline of the joke seems to be this group of people are bad, we should probably be a little bit skeptical of their personal values. And I think asking them to apologize or disavow those comments before headlining the Oscars is a really, really reasonable baseline expectation. I would expect the same of somebody who had made previous like white nationalist statements. I just think that it's easier to frame gay people as like this hate mob because when we think of LGBT people, we think of, as your channel reinforces, like silly looking like effeminate people with colored hair and a bunch of piercings, which
that
to be fair,
my channel reinforces.
It's not the only thing. Now, a little. Well, I was going to agree with you to an extent. I mean, I've been to plenty of pride parades. I know what we rep. But it's a little bit easier to paint LGBT concerns as frivolous, which can go a long way towards delegitimizing the impact of the things they're trying to say, which is a thing I think you did. I don't think you're a bigot. I think that your views of free speech are very much in line with the types of free speech that conservatives advocate for, which are usually the types that privilege people who already have societal power. I think that a broader, more critical approach of like who's being privileged and disadvantaged in any specific instance of free speech being invoked would go a long way towards broadening. It sounds patronizing, but I care about this, and I don't think you're a bigot. I mean, your content is pretty much exclusively making fun of. I mean, Straight Pride Parade. It is not
exclusive. No, it is not exclusively making fun of.
Go over the videos. So, Straight Pride Parade, Pride Month, Brie Larson.
I was talking about the Straight Pride Parade. I was actually critical.
You were saying that people are getting triggered over the Straight Pride Parade because it's a joke and a big epic troll. You do realize it's being run by actual Nazis, right?
I'm not aware of who. We
can talk about that.
I'm not.
It's
not about to take any responsibility.
No, that's fine. You don't have to make any statements on it. But I did a stream on the Straight Pride Parade from your video just 2 days ago. It was part of me doing research on you, and I had to look over a bunch of evidence concerning the backing of the Straight Pride Parade. And what's interesting is during that stream, the Straight Pride Parade's organizers, who call themselves like Happy Love Fun America or some dumb shit like that, on Facebook linked to my stream saying something like, hey, this person's making a bunch of hateful statements about us in there. Go in there and spread the love. And immediately after that happened, I had a whole bunch of Nazis in my chat. Like a lot, like full on race realist, Jewish conspiracy denialism.
Which I don't agree with that either, but
I know, but you played defense for them. Yeah, you played defense for them. Yeah, you can look over their organizers. One of them has been linked to far-right white nationalist groups. Milo Yiannopoulos is heading it. Milo is not only a fucking pedophile defender, but also has his own connections to the white nationalist groups. There's a far-right conservative who was a... Yeah, I mean, fuck Milo.
But I used to, honestly, in all honesty, I'll say this publicly, I did used to be a fan of Milo, and then when that stuff surfaced, I was no more.
Yeah, it was pretty fucking yikes. Yeah, I wasn't expecting it either. I mean, I get it. Like, he's an irreverent troll, but let me let me posit something to you.
If I can just clarify that?
Yeah, please.
First of all, I did do research on the Straight Pride Parade. I was unaware that anyone who was backing it or supporting it or whatever had racist ties. However, I mean, in all fairness, the video was on just the concept of the Straight Pride Parade, not necessarily defending the people behind it, because I do know they've funded other controversial things in the past. I didn't know that they had those.
No, I get that, and that's because they hid it very well. It actually didn't come out until sometime after the organization what they were actually going about. But this is my syllogism, and it's why I want to talk about Pride. I personally do not care about Pride. I don't. I'm pansexual. I fuck lots of people, and but I don't care. It's not an essential part of my identity. And when you went to the gay pride parade, you held up a sign saying your sexuality should not be like your identity, or something like that.
Shouldn't define you, right?
Yeah, and I totally agree with that, 100%.
So we do have some middle ground then.
That's why I wanted to talk to you, not just because like, oh, esports, YouTube drama, but I agree with you on that. The problem here is that different groups of people express pride in their like group identity for different reasons. And you know that. And I think you know this. The reason why pride exists isn't because necessarily gay people or trans people want that to be like their defining characteristic for all time. It's to show the world that, they're not ashamed of who they are. It's a solidarity thing.
And I mean, I think I made it pretty clear that I understand this, and I don't think that every trans person goes about it that way. However, I do think that some of the flaws within Pride can convey that sort of idea, which I was criticizing.
Wait, hold on. I'm thirsty. I don't know if you can see. I'm wearing a suit, and it's quite warm in my house. So, why the fuck did I? Okay. But
I am going to have to wrap this up pretty soon, though.
Oh, yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, here's what I want to end on. Okay, so you're familiar with the Black Lives Matter movement, obviously. And right. By the way, do you think it's like a valid movement? Like, do you think that like it's a legitimate response to disproportionate police shootings, imprisonment?
I did a video on it a while back where I basically explained that here's the thing is I understand the logic behind Black Lives Matter. And again, I understand that Black people face certain discrimination in this country. I'm not denying that. However, I do think that Black Lives Matter takes issues, for example, police brutality, that affects multiple racial groups, and they make it into a Blacks only issue. So I understand some of the reasoning behind the movement, but I'm not completely on board with it. Okay. I also think that it has been a little bit taken over by radicals, but that's probably a discussion for another time.
I mean, as a radical, I would probably, even if that was the case, I would end up saying it's a good thing, right? I mean, I'm sure I'm pretty far over. Right. But the reason why I asked this, and I agree there are problems with BLM. I don't like decentralized movements, for example. I'm not a fan of them. I like centralized movements. Not states, though. I'm, anarchist. But the reason why I bring this up is, okay, white lives matter. Now, all lives matter became the big counter-protest thing, but there was also a group of people saying white lives matter. These people were predominantly white nationalists, and it led me to think, why would they put forward that point? Because no one in society is devaluing white lives. Nobody thinks white people are disposable. If anything, the opposite is true. We see police tend to mobilize more researchers to find kidnapped or missing white girls than they do black girls, stuff like that, So no one's thinking white lives don't matter. But the people saying white lives do matter, that's not really what they were saying. Because everyone knows white lives matter. What they were really saying is, Black lives don't matter. And I can corroborate that with the values of the people who organized those movements. Many of them were actual white nationalists. And that's the problem I have with the Straight Pride Parade. The idea of it being a joke thing, I think is salvageable. I could lead a Straight Pride Parade. It would be very funny. I mean, Milo's gay. Why can't I lead one, right?
Right.
But when you make a movement like that, especially when it's headed by people who already have distinctly, I was going to say problematic, vitriolically bigoted views towards the group of people they're trolling, it doesn't seem like it's just a joke. It moreover seems like they're trying to reinforce the preeminent power structure by delegitimizing the prior movement. And that's what I think straight pride parade is. It's not like here's a joke or whatever. It's an explicit effort by people who oppose LGBT rights to satirize and delegitimize their way of expressing solidarity. Do you understand, at least, maybe if you don't agree,
I
do you
understand.
get more
You know what I will say this. I understand your position. I do understand where you're coming from.
Okay.
However, in defense of my video, again, I was talking about the concept of the straight pride parade. I think that taking pride in your sexuality, because something that a lot of conservatives don't agree with me on is I do think people are born gay. I think that's almost undisputable. So if you're born a certain way, I don't think it's worth taking pride in the way you were born, whether that be straight or gay. So that's more the approach I was taking for the straight pride parade. I see your reasoning behind it. However, I don't really think that it applies that well based on how my video was going about things.
Yeah, my only contention there would be that sometimes group identity is a necessary way of rebelling against like institutional oppression, like the civil rights movement being very explicitly like a black dominated thing. They couldn't just say like, hey, everyone should get the right to vote and civil rights and stuff, and everyone should be able to enjoy the same like bathrooms or whatever, because that kind of delegitimizes the severity and the targeting of the problem. But I get it. Look, I'm very not used to this, you know. I'm very used to talking to people who are Nazis, so I think that the outward aggression is something that I've come to rely on somewhat.
Don't worry about it. I think honestly, I think this discussion was really interesting, and I will say, you know, I think that you explained the bathroom thing the best out of everything we talked about. I think that I agree with you the most on the bathroom thing. Can
I make two statements from you, if I may, really quick before you go? You're probably a lot busier than I am. The first one. You're fuck Nazis, right?
Sure, fuck Nazis.
All right, good. Okay, all right. I'm glad you approve of the... Well, because the majority of my channel is pretty explicitly anti-Nazi, so I think... But here's the big one, okay? Oh, sorry?
Go ahead.
No, please.
I was going to say of course, fuck Nazis. I think that Nazi ideology is disgusting. My issue with a lot of the anti-Nazi rhetoric is that I do think that sometimes people are unfairly branded as Nazis, and that's used as justification for violence being taken against them, which is again a debate for another time.
Probably, yeah.
We can debate the whole punch Nazis thing.
But we can agree though, if somebody's full on like Jewish question, the Jewry is controlling the world by moving the browns and the blacks.
Yes, I think that's disgusting.
All right, cool. Okay, I didn't think you were gonna say no. I just want, because you know that's my I'm here for it. And second, listen, chat's begging. Please, God, please give it to them. They're craving. Can you say trans rights?
Of course, trans rights. That's not, see, a lot of this stuff is I think is based on a misconception about me. I'm not against transgender people, and I do think that they deserve rights.
All right, I just pulled up my fucking suit. I'm a little too fat for this one now. Listen, I enjoyed this conversation tremendously. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I hope that one day we can not only speak again, maybe one day we can lead our own little subversive pride parades, and you can head gay, and I can head the straight, and it will be very confusing to everyone else, and we can see each other as we walk by the main street.
And if you want, you know, we could always play Fortnite together, so we could both be gay.
All right, listen the fuck up, okay? If we, on one condition, you dance in game, you dance IRL, okay? I don't tolerate none of that bitch fucking emote spam. If you're doing it, if you're hitting the button for it in game, I need to see on that cam. I need to see.
No
you
way,
flossing.
dude. Come on, I'm a reactionary internet troll. Of course, I'm gonna be only hiding behind my computer screen. I'm never gonna do it in real life.
All right, I'll dance hard enough for both of us. Thank you so much for the time.
No problem. Thank you, man. I had a really great discussion. See ya.
Have a good one. Oh, that went infinitely better than I thought it would.